Path of Exile 2 can be a little intimidating for new players, but this video will set you up for success. This video is going to be the most complete beginner guide for Path of Exile that I could make without spoiling anything. By the time you finish this video, you will understand every system you need to know to play the game confidently. If you got questions, ask them in the comments below. I'll read and respond to every single one. Also, be sure to take advantage of the timestamps to revisit any topic you need to come back to later. Now, let's get into it. All right, the first thing that you're gonna do in Path of Exile 2 is create a character. You'll be able to choose between 6 different classes. You've got the Sorceress, the Warrior, the Ranger, the Witch, the Mercenary, and the Monk. Once you've decided what class you want to play, you're going to have to go ahead and put your name in and then choose what league you want to play in, whether it's standard, hardcore, solo self-found, or hardcore, solo self-found. Most people will be playing in standard. If you choose hardcore, when your character dies, it gets sent to standard. To stay in hardcore, your character must remain deathless. Solo self-found means that you're going to play through the game alone and you're not going to be trading with other players. Most people play alone, but most people also participate in the trading economy. So being self-found makes the game quite a bit harder because you won't be able to trade for items that would fix the holes in your build. Let's say you needed some fire resistance. Well, if you can't trade for it, you're going to be forced to wait until you find the piece of gear that has all of the stats on it that you need, including that fire resistance. So it just makes it a little bit harder to gear your character out, and you tend to progress a little bit more slowly in solo self-found, but this is definitely my favorite way to play the game. And then you've got hardcore solo self-found, which is, once again, if you die, you get sent to standard, and the name of the game in hardcore is Don't Die. Once you've chosen your league, you'll go ahead and hit continue, and you'll be dropped into the game where your first question will be, what type of movement do you want to use? I highly recommend WASD. They've built this game around it, and it allows you to cast your abilities while moving, which is going to make it a lot easier to get out of the attacks of bosses. So you'll walk up and fail to help this poor soul right here, and that enemy is going to drop a bow. If you don't have it set to auto-equip items that you pick up, you're going to have to open up your inventory manually and equip the bow, just by clicking on it and setting it into your weapon slot. At first, all you'll be able to do is basic attack your enemies, but that quickly changes once you get the first gem that you're going to be using in this game. Now, this is a great time to talk about how gems work. So when you have a gem in your inventory, you click on it and it opens up your gem menu. If you're on PC, you're going to be right-clicking on it. From here, you're going to set it into one of your many gem slots. Each of these is basically an ability that your character is going to have. So now we slotted the lightning arrow gem, which is going to allow us to use lightning arrow. But before we can use lightning arrow, we need to put it on our bind somewhere. So I'm going to put it right here for right click, because I'm on PC. Choose whatever you want. Now, when we right click, it shoots a lightning arrow. When you get more gems, you can click on an ability and change it to anything you want, anytime you want. The next thing you're going to want to do is fill these holes right here with support gems. So your skill gem is the first one, and then you get support gems that support that skill. Support gems are what really make a skill pop off. It's what really makes the skill do loads of damage or hit a massive area, right? Support gems are everything in Path of Exile. We'll deep dive into gems and support gems more in a moment. So you're going to run forward a little bit more and get your first support gem. In this phase, you're probably going to take some damage or run out of mana, and the game's going to remind you that you do have potions that you need to use to keep yourself alive, and you're going to want to get used to using them often. You're going to be spamming those things. As you run by these checkpoints, these act as respawn points. They also fill up your health and mana, and they fill up your potion charges. You'll notice here, if we look at our potions, each time we use the potion, it's going to give us 50 health over 3 seconds, and it consumes 10 of the 60 charges on use. So that means we get to use this 6 times before it runs out without refilling it. You can refill your potion charges by walking past a checkpoint, or by killing enemies. Now, the first boss is where you're going to be taught the very important lesson of dodging when the boss does attacks. You'll hear a cue when he's going to do an attack that you want to dodge. There it was. We heard the cue again. When the boss spawns adds, that's not always a bad thing, because if you need potion charges, that's a great way to get them, is killing those adds that he's spawning. Really practice using your dodge roll here, because it's going to be critical to you surviving in the future. Filling up the stun bar below his name will stun him. Some bosses are stunned for a long time, and some are stunned for a very short time. Now let's talk about gems. In order to unlock more skills, you're going to need to find uncut gems, and then you'll turn those uncut gems into the skill that you want to slot on your character over here in your gem menu. You can open up your gem menu by going to the menu here and clicking the skills panel, or by pressing G, as in gems, on PC. So you've got 3 types of uncut gems that are going to drop in this game. One is the skill gem. When you get one of these, you'll click on it, and this will open up the gem menu. from here, you'll be able to choose any skill in the game. At first, you'll only be able to unlock the skills on the first row, but then once you start finding skill level 3 gems, see the Roman numeral 3 right here, that indicates that you need level 3 uncut gems to unlock one of these. And on this row, you need level 5 uncut gems and so on. The only way to get higher level uncut gems is simply to level up and kill higher level mobs. The higher level the mob, the higher level the uncut gem that they will drop for you. So that's how you get your uncut skill gems and what they do. And be aware of the fact that skills in Path of Exile 2 are tied to your weapon, not to your class. So if you want to be a witch that's wielding a crossbow and using crossbow abilities, you can absolutely do that. Classes in Path of Exile 2 are much more about the ascension that they offer, and each class has 3 ascensions. We'll dive more into that later, but you choose the class because of the passives in the ascension that you want to play. You don't necessarily choose the class because of the skills you want to use, although the two will line up sometimes, because naturally a witch's passives will lend themselves to being a spellcaster of sorts, whereas a ranger's passives will lend themselves towards being a bow wielder of sorts. If you hover over an ability, it will tell you if there's any reason you can't unlock it or you can't use it. It'll say that you already have this equipped, or it'll say that you're missing some requirement in order to use it. So just be aware of the requirements that are listed next to a skill that are preventing you from unlocking it. Sometimes it's going to be something as simple as not having enough intelligence, enough strength, or enough dex, and you're going to need to go ahead and go about getting that. We'll talk about how to get those stats here in a moment. So those are your skill gems. This one right here is a level 15 uncut skill gem. So I can use it to either unlock a skill for the first time, or I can use it to upgrade a skill to level 15. For instance, I already have Glacial Bolt, it's level 10. I could use it on this one to upgrade it to level 15, and that way it's a higher level one, and if I ever need to use it, it's doing much more damage. Eventually your skill menu will look like this, and all the ones you're using a lot are going to have all of your best support gems in them. Now let's talk about support gems. How do we get those? So you're going to see uncut support gems drop on the ground. There's 3 different levels of uncut support gems. The first one is going to allow you to unlock that first row of support gems. And if you uncheck this box down here, this is really important, you're going to have a lot more options to use for your support gems. So now here's all of the first tier of support gems, right? This is just what the game recommends to you. This is to help new players not be overwhelmed. It's saying, hey, here's a few that we think would be great for a ranger in this case. And alternatively, if you uncheck this, this is where you can really dabble and really make a build that's truly your own by choosing from any of the support gems in the game. You can only use each support gem one time, so you can't put the same support gem in 2 different abilities. So that's why some of these are grayed out. It's saying you are already using this on a different ability, so you can't unlock it again. So sometimes you'll find yourself really wishing you had the increased AoE size gem on more than one ability, but you're going to have to choose which skill is going to benefit the most from having that increased area of effect. Now, when you click on the gem, it's going to bring you to this menu here, and it's going to show you its recommended ones. And then on the left here, it's going to show you all of your abilities that you've slotted. So you can easily choose the one that you want to look for support gems for and see what the recommendations are and uncheck. And just like the skill gems, you got this Roman numeral on the left here. We've clicked on a level 1 support gem. So it's got all the level 1 ones unlocked. In order to unlock a level 2 or even a level 3 support gem, there's only 3 tiers right now. You'd have to use a support gem level 2 or level 3. Here's a level 3 one right here. And as you can see, we can choose any support gem. And don't worry about using your skill gems. Don't worry about using your support gems. These are not something you need to hoard. As you can see here, if we go to my stash, you can see I am swimming in these gems. I might even say I'm drowning in them, right? I've got way more than I need. I can safely stop picking them up unless it happens to be a higher level than I've already got. But we've got loads of the tier 3 support gems. So use them. Don't be shy. Go ahead and play with different things. If you pick something that you end up not liking later, that's okay. You'll find another support gem in no time. Finally, the last type of uncut gem is the uncut spirit gem. Spirit gems are unique because you have 2 resources over here. You've got mana and you've got spirit. Spirit is something that you'll unlock by playing the game. And after you've played through the campaign, you'll have about 100 spirit, assuming that you're not getting any more than that from gear. Mana is a resource that you use to cast active abilities. Like if you want to cast a fireball at an enemy, you're going to use mana. Spirit is a permanent buff to your character that's going to be on all the time, like this one here, Herald of Ash. You can see this meter around the mana bar. That is our spirit gauge. When we're not using any, it's full. If I turn on my Herald of Ash that I've slotted here, this was an uncut spirit gem that I turned into Herald of Ash by doing the same thing as we do before, where you right click the ability and you get to choose from a spirit skill. So when we right click to activate, that turns it on, and you notice we've used half of our spirit here. We've got 55 out of 100 left. If I wanted to, I could put another support gem in here. So now I have 2 support gems inside of there, and it's using a little bit more. Each support gem that you put inside of your spirit ability is going to make it cost more spirit, and it's going to eat more into it. And if you want to run more than 1 spirit ability at a time, you can do that, but you're going to need to wear gear that has a spirit line on it. Like this one right here, it says 68 to armor. Another piece of gear might say 50 to spirit, right? Increasing the amount of spirit that you have and increasing the number of permanent buffs that your character can have active at any one time. So what are examples of spirit buffs? Well, Herald of Ash here. Every time we kill an enemy, any damage we do beyond its remaining health gets applied to the enemies around it in an explosion. Or one of my favorites here is attrition, which allows us to deal more damage the longer that we're near a boss. So the longer the fight goes on, the more our damage ramps up. That's just a couple of examples of the spirit buffs that you can have in this game. Guides like this take a massive amount of time. If you're enjoying it, the nicest thing you can do is leave a comment, a like, or subscribe to let the algorithm know that this video is worth showing to other people. Thanks so much. Let's continue. Now, first, let's quickly talk about your UI in this game. Over here on the left, you've got your health bar. So when this depletes all the way to 0, you die. And then the blue gauge around it, that's your shield. That is depleted before your health is. So the more shield you have, the more damage you can take before you start losing health. And it automatically refills when you're not in combat. So a few seconds after you leave combat, it'll start filling up again. So this is your energy shield, and right here is a gauge for your actual shield. So if you're wearing a shield, you can do an active block, and when enemies hit it, you'll see that gauge start to fill up. There it goes. Every time the enemy hits it, it fills up a little bit more. And when it fills all the way up, your character gets stunned, gets knocked back, and you've got to stop blocking for it to go back down. Your health will also regen, but much more slowly, unless you're using your health potion, which is right here. You've got a health potion and a mana potion. How many times you can use these before they run out really depends on the stats that are applied to the item. So just like a piece of gear can have stats, so too can your potions. And you can even add stats to them or craft them yourself to make them perfect for your build. When you kill higher level mobs, they'll drop higher level flasks, then those higher level flasks will replenish more of your life and more of your mana per use. So while you're playing through Path of Exile 2, you're constantly going to be looking for better flasks, because when you pop a healing potion, you want it to be able to heal you faster than the enemies can hurt you. And the only way that's going to work is if you're upgrading your flask every time you find a better one than you're using. If you use a healing flask and you still die, it's likely that your flask is underleveled and you need to replace it. Next to your flasks, we've got 3 slots right here. These are going to be for charms. Charms are permanent buffs that you can have on your character. These kind of replace the way flasks used to work in Path of Exile 1 by giving you buffs. So for instance, this charm here grants us immunity to freeze when it's slotted. So if a monster freezes us, this charm will automatically activate and unfreeze us, and we'll be immune to freeze for 3 seconds. So we get 3 seconds of freeze immunity, and it's going to use 80 of the 80 charges on you. So it's only going to be able to activate once. The charges for reusing this will refill automatically as you kill enemies or when you interact with a well. Above your charm, you've got your menu right here. If you ever want to open up a menu but you can't remember the hotkey, just click this and you'll see all of the menus that you can open. It's going to be a while before the muscle memory kicks in and you're able to open each one of these without looking here, so don't feel bad. Next to that, you've got your microtransaction shop. Here, there's no pay to win. There's simply cosmetics and quality of life. One of the most popular things to buy in this game is going to the sales section here and picking up the stash tabs that you need. So in this game, you have a stash. So here it is. Here's a stash. It's a little chest right there in between all these people. You're gonna have a stash. This is where all of your items are gonna be stored that you're finding out on your loots and out on your runs. So for example, here is a currency stash tab. This is probably the most popular one for people to have and to pay for in this game. You have to buy this, but it's usually not terribly expensive, and you can find it on sale at least once per season. So if it's not on sale right now, just wait a while, check in on it, and it eventually will be. The nice thing about these tabs is if you've got items, you can just walk up to the tab and click on them, and it automatically puts them in there. Even if we're in a different tab, we put this away, it knows it needs to put it here. And so it keeps it nice and organized, and it can have massive unlimited stacks, right, of these materials. So you don't have to worry about it pouring over and overflowing. And so that's what tabs do. They keep your inventory organized. Otherwise, you have big ones like this where you're just slamming things in there and you have to keep it organized on your own. Now, in order for items to automatically go into the tab that they're supposed to go into, you have to click on them here. It says right click to customize when I hover over that. So we click, and then here there's a currency checkbox. Check that. Now that's making it so that anytime you click on your currency over here to send it to your stash, it automatically puts it in this tab. So even if I'm clicked on this tab right here, right, it didn't go in here, it put it in here. Doesn't matter where I'm at. When I send it in, this tab automatically sucks it up and holds it for me. That's what the game calls affinities. See, if we look at this right here, it says affinities, currency. And if we look at my essence tab, we've got that one set up to suck up all of my essences when I've collected them. And of course, you can also customize tabs to make them easier to find, you know, change the color, change the name. I like to keep the names short because then I can see more of them at the top here. Alternatively, you can use this list over here, and it's really handy once you get more tabs than will fit right here. This list of tabs is the same as this one. It's just vertical instead of horizontal. If you right click on a tab and it doesn't have the option to change the color or change the name of the tab, that's because it's not a premium tab. Premium tabs are ones that you buy from the cash shop. You can purchase entirely new premium tabs like this one right here, or you can upgrade existing tabs into a premium tab. I'll do a whole section later in this video on how to trade with other players and how that whole system works, using the website, using your stash tabs to trade. Just be aware of the fact that in order to effectively trade with other players, you're going to need to have at least one premium stash tab, because if you right click on a premium stash tab, you'll notice it has the option to make that tab public so that the website that people browse for items on can see the items you're trying to sell. If we look at a basic stash tab, you'll notice you cannot make that stash tab public, which means other people wouldn't be able to browse for your item that you're trying to sell on the POE Trade website. Again, I'll dive way deeper into that in a little bit. Now, if we keep going here, you've got a clock if you've turned it on in the options. That's your time, not the in-game time. Then underneath that here, we've got the XP bar. This character is level 77 and 19% of the way to level 78. And it tells you how much XP we need and how much XP we were getting per hour when we were playing. Then over on the right half of the screen, you've got this button right here. This is how you open a portal when you're out and about. I can't do it because I'm in town right now. You can open as many portals as you want, and you can come back to town and you can touch the fountain, refill your health, refill your potions, and then go back through your portal to continue ending your enemies. So because you're going to be using the portal ability a lot, and clicking on this is a little more troublesome than you'd expect, what you're going to want to do is hotkey it. So go to input, then scroll all the way to the bottom, and down here it says create a portal. I've got mine to F1. That was bound over top of seeing metrics that I never look at, so F1 works out pretty well for me. Just pick something that's going to be easy for you to reach, because as I mentioned, you're going to be using it quite often. Then right here, we've got all of our abilities, and below the ability, it tells you what button that ability is bound to at the moment. You can change these bindings to anything that suits your fancy. To the right of that, we've got our mana gauge. We can use this to cast spells, and then around that, we've got our spirit gauge right here. That's what we use to keep permanent buffs up. Then above your mana gauge, you've got your quests that you're going to be trying to do. You can open up your quest log at any time by opening up the map and then clicking this tab right here. And you can see where you're at, which quests are complete, which ones are not. And you're going to want to do every quest in every zone. And before we talk about the map, the last thing up here is your mini map. Pretty straightforward. Now, as for the map, there's a lot of really important information here that people might not be aware of. First of all, not only can you see all of the waypoints that you can teleport to, that's what these blue ones are. If you see something that looks like a cave entrance, you can click on that, and now you're looking at the lower map. That means that there's an area underground there. You can toggle between above ground and below ground areas by clicking this button over here. This is going to be really important because you're going to want to look for these right here. You see the skull? That means there's a boss there, and you want to kill all of these bosses, particularly the ones that have the little cross next to the skull. So this one has a little cross next to the skull. This one does not. The ones with the cross next to the skull, or the cross here next to this instrument, that means that you're going to get some kind of permanent stat increase, whether it's fire resistance, which I can't tell you how useful it is to get that. Right here, we got 10% cold resistance permanent. So we're 10% closer to having our cold resistance capped, which is huge in this game. We'll talk more about that in a second. Sometimes it'll give you permanent buff to your life, so you have more HP. So you're going to want to get in the habit of occasionally looking at your map, seeing if there's any skulls in the areas that you've been to that you missed, especially the ones with the little cross next to them. If so, you want to go back and do that. For example, here's a skull with a cross that this character hasn't done yet. If I go over and do that and kill this boss, he's going to give me 20 HP, which doesn't sound like a lot, but I promise you that's a lot in this game. If we come back and kill this boss on cruel difficulty, instead of giving 20 HP, he gives you 8% increased maximum health. That is huge. So you really want to make sure you kill this boss on cruel difficulty in Act 1. At first, opening this map is going to look a little bit confusing, maybe a little overwhelming as you're trying to figure out how to navigate it. Don't worry. Just know if the game's telling you to go to the next area and you're not sure how to get there, just run around the perimeter of that zone until you find an exit that takes you into the next area. You can open up your map on the middle of the screen on PC. You just press tab and it opens up the map here so you can see a bigger version of what you have and haven't explored in this area. And be thorough, like I mentioned, because being thorough is going to make sure you find those side bosses. It's also going to make sure that you get enough XP so that you're not under leveled when you inevitably get to a major boss in the game. There are boss encounters spread throughout the game. There's mini bosses in every zone, right? So try to do all of those because it's going to be essential to gearing out your character, to getting your character the experience that it needs and the levels that it needs to be able to take down those harder bosses later on. As you kill enemies, they're going to drop items on the ground like this one right here. White items are your base items, and then those can be found or upgraded to blue items. These are magic. Then you've got rare items. These are the yellow ones. And then beyond that, you've got unique items like this one right here. The difference between these things is simply the number of stats on them. So a blue item can have up to 2 stats. This one has 15 mana, 9% increased rarity of items found. We'll talk about crafting more in a minute, but a yellow item can have up to 6 stats, and then a unique item has unique stats on it, something that can be build defining and something that you cannot put on or find on a magic or a rare item, right? It's got unique stats to it. Since we're talking about gear, let's dive into our gear menu here for a second real quick. You've got your 2 potions that we touched on. You'll find these on the ground. They'll look like this or like this. You'll find it, you'll put it on. You'll notice that it's better than what you're wearing because the amount of health that you recover from using it is going to be more than the previous one that you're wearing. That's usually a pretty good indicator that it's an upgrade. There's also other stats on them that you're going to learn to look out for and learn to appreciate as you play the game. So definitely pay attention to the stats that are on your potions and figure out which ones you like and which ones you don't. Next to that, you've got your charm, as we mentioned earlier. Now, an important thing to recognize about charms is this one here says it gives me 25% cold resistance, and it's really important to cap our cold resistance, but it's also important to know that this doesn't help you cap your cold resistance. This just means that when this charm activates, we get 25% cold resistance. Now, the problem with that is that means we have to get hit by cold damage before our cold resistance is turned on, and that cold resistance only lasts for 4 seconds. So after we run out of charges on this, we're going to have 25% less cold resistance. And the resistance cap in this game is 75%. So definitely get all your resistances to 75 rather than relying on your charm to proc and add 25 resistance for you. Above that, we've got our belts. Next to that, we've got our gloves and our boots. Then you get to wear 2 different rings in this game and 1 amulet. It goes right here. Above that, you've got your helmet. And then finally, your weapon. You can either wear one 2-handed weapon, or you can wear 2 1-hand weapons, right? You can put one on each side, or you could wear a 1-hand weapon and a shield, or you could wear a bow and a quiver. And also you can have 2 different weapons. You can swap between the 2 by pressing X on PC. Don't worry about having 2 different weapons equipped for now. That's more of a niche build setup to have 2 different weapons that you're swapping between, and not something that I would worry about too much when I'm learning to play the game. Now let's go over a new system in Path of Exile 2 that has to do with unidentified tiers. So you'll notice sometimes you'll see items on the ground like this, where they'll have unidentified tier 2 or 3. And the thing to know about this is the higher the tier, the better. So what's happening here is it's not guaranteeing that this item is going to have tier 3 specs on it or anything like that. There's 5 different tiers, 1 through 5. So 5 being the best. And if it's tier 5, what that means is it has an incredibly high chance of having incredibly good rolls. And it will even try to avoid certain useless stats like light radius, for example, something nobody ever wants on an item, but it's just kind of there to ruin some of them, right? Well, if you see a tier 5 item, that item is doing its best to avoid getting anything like that and doing its best to have the stats that you want, like life, resistances, and things along that line, and really big values of those things. Whereas tier 2 is going to be leaning in the direction of having a better chance of having better stats. It's nowhere near as guaranteed as, say, a tier 3, 4, or 5 item would be. So if we identify these tier 3 gloves right here, let's see what happens. Not great, right? And so even at tier 3, the results are definitely not guaranteed. They're just better than if it wasn't tier 3. What it did do though is we got pretty high rolls. We got T8 on the first roll, T6, T7, T4, right? Those are pretty big rolls on an item like this. If we look at this tier 2 item, this one got 159 life, 38 cold resist, 12 lightning resist, 161 mana. Not a bad belt, really. And look at that. It got a T11 roll and a T10 roll. That is massive. That is really, really high rolls on this item. We got a T2 down here for lightning resistance, unfortunately. That's why it's so small, but a big T7 for the cold resistance, which kind of leads us into the next topic, which is the rolls on items and how to determine if you got a good one or a bad one. So there's two different things to factor in. Like I kind of have been hinting at here, on PC, if you hold the Alt down or whatever the button is on console to view more stats and examine the item, it's telling you two things. It tells you the range that it could have rolled in at the tier that it got. So the tiers are on the right here, T7, T2, T10, T11. The bigger this tier, the higher this range will be. So this one was 150 to 164 and we rolled a 161. This T10 here was 150 to 174 and we rolled a 159, right? So we did really well on those top two because we rolled so high on the tier of these. In large part, probably because this was an unidentified tier 2 item. So here's a helmet, unidentified tier 2. Let's see if we get lucky again. Hold Alt. Not quite as lucky, but we're not seeing really low ones like tier 1, tier 2 on this one either. So, you know, it does seem to be pushing the item in the right direction. However, it's missing life, so it's a pretty dead item for most people. So if you pick up an item and you're trying to decide if it's a good or a bad item, well, first of all, if it's better than what you're wearing, it's a great item. And when you're trying to determine the value of it, you can look and see what tier it rolled. If it's got really high tiers on it, it could be a pretty valuable item. And it might be worth checking it out on the auction house to see if you can sell it for a pretty penny. Now, since we're here, let's look at this screen right here because there's a ton of really important information that it's important that you understand. Path of Exile 2 is really fun as long as you kind of understand what it is you're trying to accomplish with all this gear that you're finding. And it gives you a sense of purpose and a sense of direction to know exactly what it is you're trying to accomplish here. For all of your gear, while you're leveling up, the main thing that you want to try to look for is health and resistances. Those are the two stats that if you find it on the gear, that's great. And you want to work your way to getting these up to 75. Your lightning, your fire, and your cold resistance. You want to get those to 75% ASAP. When you have 75% fire resist, that means you take 75% less damage from fire. That's huge. What that means alternatively is if you have 0 lightning resist, like this character here, you're taking 75% more lightning damage than you otherwise would have. So this low level character right here, we've got a pair of gloves that are giving us fire resistance and cold resist. That's great for this little low level sorceress, right? That's helping to contribute to her resistances. So that's what you're looking for on your gear. And then as far as your weapon goes, you're looking for a way to increase your damage. If you're a spellcaster, then you're looking for a weapon that gives you increased spell damage. Like this one right here gives me 71% increased spell damage. Or if you're casting fire abilities, you're looking for a weapon that maybe gives you increased fire damage. If you're doing physical damage, like hitting things with a sword or hitting things with a bow, then you're looking for weapons that tell you they're doing lots of physical damage. So when you start the game, your weapon is what you're using for your damage, and then your gear is primarily going to be used for your defenses. However, you know, eventually you'll get stats on gear that is also going to contribute to your offense. If you ever walk into a boss fight or walk into a pack of enemies and you die really fast, it's almost always going to be because you are short on some resistances. One of the easiest ways to solve your resistances problem, because you will die if your resistances are lower than the game wants them to be at any given point in the game, is to use the runes that you'll find dropping all over the game. These runes can be socketed into your gear to give you easy access to certain resistances that you might need along your way. We'll talk more about runes and socketing gear in a second here when we get into crafting. Then finally, we have chaos resistance. Chaos resistance is a little bit different. Generally in Path of Exile 2, you get away with having lower chaos resistance than you do with fire. So you can run around with 20 or 30 chaos resistance and be fine 99% of the time. If you run around with 20 or 30 fire resistance, you're going to die constantly and just you'll walk up to a pack and you'll get evaporated and you're like, oh man, I don't know what oh man, they must have done fire damage. So chaos resistance, it's a lot more lenient. You're not expected to get this to 75 right away, and it probably won't be till end game that you're able to cap out your chaos resistance. So don't stress this one too much. Above that, we've got our armor and our evasion and our block. Your armor is really important. Armor is going to reduce the physical damage you take from both attacks and spells, but provides no benefit against other damage types. The exact damage reduction depends on the damage dealt, but it cannot be higher than 90%. So here it tells us that the estimated estimated physical damage reduction our armor is giving us is 15% on this character right here, because she's really low level and she's wearing, some cloth gear and stuff. We've got evasion, which is a different stat. So your gear that you find will have one of three stats. It'll either have armor, evasion, or energy shield on it. Armor usually comes on strength-based gear. So heavy armor will have armor as a stat. Evasion will come on like your leather type of gear, right? The stuff that a ranger would wear or a rogue. They'll have evasion on their gear. So here's an example of some gear. It says evasion rating 53. It doesn't have any armor. It doesn't have any energy shield. And because this lends itself to rogues and rangers, it requires dexterity to wear. Armor that provides high armor values requires strength to wear. And then energy shield, as you might guess, requires intelligence to wear because it's for mages. Now, if you choose to wear a shield in this game, you can block some incoming damage, and it's a great way to mitigate incoming damage and the amount of damage that your character is taking. Above this here, you can see your life, your energy shield, your mana, and your spirit kind of written out here. Above that, we've got our stats. Now, let's quickly touch on what these stats do. You've got strength, dex, and intelligence. And these work very differently in Path of Exile 2 than they do in other ARPGs. In Path of Exile 2, your strength isn't increasing your damage. It's allowing you to equip certain pieces of gear. It's allowing you to equip certain gems. Some gems will have requirements that need you to have a certain amount of strength to wield them, and some gear will have a certain amount of strength required for you to wear them. So that's why you would pump strength. The other great thing about strength is every 1 point of strength gives you 2 life. So you get an item with 10 strength. That item is also giving you 20 HP. That is really important to understand because that's one of the best ways to get more HP on your character if you need it. Next, we have dexterity, and similar to strength, your dexterity is going to be required to use certain gems as well as equip certain pieces of gear. And it's also going to grant you 5 accuracy for every 1 dexterity. Accuracy is what allows you to hit enemies without missing. The more accuracy you have, the more likely you are to hit the enemies. So if you are a melee character or if you're a bow character and you're trying to attack an enemy and you see yourself missing a lot, that's because you need to get more accuracy. So one way to do that is by getting more dexterity, but there's also an accuracy stat that can be found on gear and in your skill tree. So if we look at the skill tree right here, you can see this node right here says 40% increased accuracy when you're at close range. So that might be something that you take if you feel like you're spending a lot of time fighting things up close and you're missing a lot. Then finally, we have intelligence. Intelligence, again, it's going to be used to wear equipment that grants energy shield, and every 1 point of intelligence is going to grant 2 mana. So that's what those stats do. That's what those stats are for. They're mostly used to give yourself the ability to wear gear and to wear skill gems. And then they happen to have this extra bonus attached to them that gives you that other stat. All right, next let's talk about important NPCs that you're going to find in this game. The first important one you're going to find is going to be the hooded one here. You're going to find him in Grellwood. You'll have to do a quest. It's pretty hard to miss, so don't stress it, but make sure that before you leave Act 1, you've got the hooded one, because what he does is he can identify items for you. So anytime you come back to town, you can talk to him, hit identify items, and it'll identify all the items that are in your inventory. If you're on PC, you can just control click him and it'll automatically identify all the items in a single click. You don't have to actually click the button there. So control click and it identifies everything in your inventory. It's a very nice little time saver. Another important thing that you want to do in Act 1 is make sure that you find Renly's workshop tools, because that's what's going to allow you to use the salvage bench and the reforging bench in town. And the reforging bench is really important because it allows you to combine items to make a different item. Sometimes it's a better item and sometimes it's simply a different item. Really useful recipes that you can use for this are putting 3 whetstones in there. For instance, I have these 3 whetstones right here. Now they all have to be the same in terms of rarity. So this one's magic, this is white, this is white. So I need to make them all magic. Now I can come here, put all 3 in, and it's going to spit out, instead of 3 2s, it's going to give me 1 3. So it went up 1 tier. It's whetstone tier level 3 now. And you can use that to get higher tier maps once you start progressing through the whetstone system in the game. We'll talk way more about that in a moment. Another really useful recipe for this is your runes. So let's say that you have way too many of a rune that you never use. Well, what you could do is you could put them in here and reforge them, and then it's going to give you a different type of rune. So if you're looking for a specific rune and you don't have any, but you have loads of something else that you're never going to use, you can do this. So these ones give mana and weapon leech as mana, right? Something I'm never going to use on my character. I could reforge this, and now it gave me lightning resist, which might be something that I need way more, as well as lightning damage if I put it on a weapon. So very useful recipe there. You can also put in gear. So if you have 3 of the same type of belt, you can reforge it to get a new belt and have one more chance at an item. So definitely remember when you're in Ogum Village to find Renly's workshop and grab that tool for him and complete that quest so that you've got access to all of this. Another important thing you can do here is with the workbench, you can break down items that have quality. See how that item has quality 12%. You can also break down items that have sockets. And by doing so, you get the materials that allow you to add quality to an item or add sockets to an item. So if I break this down, so that gave me armorer's scrap, which improves the quality of armor. So I could put that on, let's say, my chest piece if I wanted that to have higher quality. Boom. Now you see my quality is 2% on my armor, which is going to increase that armor and evasion rating up there at the top. We'll throw one more on there. Right now, armor is at 468, evasion's at 442, and they both went up 477, 451. You can add quite a bit of defense to your armor by adding quality to it. And an easy way to get the material that allows you to add quality is simply to break it down at the salvage bench. Same goes for sockets. So these items have sockets, but I don't need any of these items. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now I've got 3 artificer shards. These work a little bit differently. So for these, you've got to find the shards, but when you get 10 of them, so you can see I have a stack of 9 here. Now when I add 1, look, now I have an artificer's orb. So those are going to allow you to add sockets to your gear that you can put the runes into. And as we kind of touched on earlier, runes are really important for getting the resistances that you need while you're progressing through the campaign and into the early end game. These can really help to fill in any gaps that you have in your resistances. So that is the salvage bench. Really encourage you to pick up items with sockets. I really encourage you to pick up items with quality on them and get the materials that are going to allow you to add sockets and quality to your armor to make them quite a bit more powerful. If you're not taking advantage of runes while you're leveling up and progressing through the campaign, you're definitely going to struggle way more with taking extra damage from elemental attacks of your enemies. Another really important NPC that you unlock is going to be Una. Now, you can buy or sell items from her, as well as a lot of other NPCs. A nice trick here is to just search by rare, and then it'll highlight the items that are rare. And these are usually the ones that you might want to consider buying. So just kind of peek in, see if there's a rare item, and you can do that at any of these guys that sell things for you. You can check and see if they have any rare items and see if any of those would be good. Now, it's very common for these NPCs to sell something that is an upgrade. Many of my bows as I was progressing through the campaign were actually bows that I purchased from a vendor, not bows that I found. But the reason we're going to talk about Una specifically is because she has the option to disenchant items. So if we click that, we can put a rare item in here, and that's going to give us a regal shard. When we get 10 regal shards, that becomes a regal orb. That allows us to upgrade a magic item into a rare item. So it'll add 1 stat to it and turn it into a rare. We could also put magic items in here and get a transmutation shard. We get 10 transmutation shards and we get a transmutation orb, which allows us to upgrade a white item into a blue item. This is a great way to get these materials, especially regal orbs. You're going to want a lot of regal orbs. So start disenchanting rares early and often, because regal orbs are something you're going to use on your waystones. Once you start mapping, you're going to use them like crazy, and that's going to be how you sustain your maps without running out of the ones that you're trying to do. If that's confusing, don't worry. I'm going to dive way more into waystones and all the other endgame systems in a bit. Just know it's good to disenchant rares, and future you is going to be really happy that past you took the time to do it when you have loads of regal orbs to slam into all of your waystones. Now, as you progress through the game, the NPC in town, like for instance in Act 2, instead of Una, it's going to be Zarka that disenchants your items. Some NPCs will stay the same, like the hooded one is still here to identify items, but now Zarka is disenchanting. So each time you get to a new act, kind of familiarize yourself with what each one is now responsible for. Eventually, you'll get a NPC that allows you to gamble for items. So if we talk to Risu here, you can see that there's items and all you can see is the price of the item. You can't actually see what it's going to give you. And this is actually a really effective way of getting upgrades. It is gambling though, so chances are you're going to get something awful, but every once in a while you'll get something that's a nice upgrade. So what I encourage you to do while you're gambling is look at the piece of gear that you have that is the worst. best, right? You'd say, man, my belt is just awful. I really could use a belt that has life and resistances on it instead of just one or the other or neither. And so you'd come in here, you'd look for belts, and then you'd gamble on one. And every once in a while, you're going to get something really solid. This works really well, especially while your gear is really bad early on. It becomes less effective the deeper into the game you get because it gets harder and harder to find something that is an upgrade this way, and it burns through your gold really fast. So just be careful with that. Now, eventually you're going to get a hideout, and all of these NPCs will be in here for you to talk to. Okay, now let's go over all of the currencies in the game, what they do, how we get them, because these are really important. And this is going to lead us into crafting, which is also really important. Okay, so the first currency we have here is the Orb of Transmutation. The Orb of Transmutation is going to allow us to take a white item like this sapphire ring right here, right? All this thing is doing is it's base 21 to cold resistance. Anytime you find a sapphire ring, it's going to have a little bit of cold resistance on it right there. And we can take this item, and an Orb of Transmutation is going to allow us to take this item from white to blue. So we put this on there. Now we've got one more stat, and it says we've got 23 to strength on here. The Orb of Augmentation is going to augment this magic item with a new random modifier. So this is going to add your second stat to your magic ring. Now we have 86 mana added to that item. And this is as many stats as we're going to be able to fit onto it while it's magic. So to get more stats, we have to upgrade it to a rare item. That's where the Regal Orb comes into play. This upgrades a magic item to a rare item, adding one more modifier. So we put this on here. Now we have a rare item. This is added 22 to evasion rating. So far, this ring's not working out great for us. We wouldn't be happy with this results at all. And that's just the way crafting goes. After this, you would typically go to your exalted orbs and you would add more stats to this rare item until it fills up using your exalted orbs. Now, the next currency we have here is the Orb of Alchemy. This is going to upgrade a normal item to a rare item with 4 modifiers, right? So you're kind of skipping a step. You're committing to the upgrade, because typically what you'll do when you're crafting is you'll put your Orb of Transmutation onto the item, you'll see what stats you get, and then you'll put your Orb of Augmentation. And if you don't like the first 2 stats, if you're like, oh man, this is awful, I'm not liking how this is going, you wouldn't want to commit any more currency to it. So you would end up walking away from a craft if you didn't like how it was going. The Orb of Alchemy skips that first step. Boom, it's already a rare item with 4 modifiers. So you're jumping straight in. So we'll use this on this as an example. Here we have a Waystone, because you can use these crafting currencies on a lot of things in the game. You can use it on Waystones, you can use it on gear, weapons, you can use it on lockboxes that you find in maps, you can use it on all sorts of stuff. So if you walk up to something that has a rarity attached to it, like a chest or something like that, and you're curious if you can further craft that thing out in the wild, go for it. Give it a try and see what happens. So here we'll use the Orb of Alchemy on this Waystone tier 10, and there we go. It jumped it straight to 4 stats. Perfect for us. So we'll go ahead and use that later. Okay, now we have VAAL Orbs. VAAL Orbs modify an item unpredictably. So it might change up to 2 of the stats on this item, or it might add a stat to it, or it might upgrade the item. VAAL Orbs have some really useful uses. The first one that I would bring your attention to is for your gems. So when you're playing through the game, you'll get to a point where you're having a really hard time getting your last support gem socket on a gem. You're looking for the item that lets you add sockets to it, like this one right here only has 2. This one has 4. This one has all 5. So sometimes you'll have the first 4, but you just can't find that last one. Or maybe you have the first 2 and you just want to get that third one earlier than later. You can go ahead and VAAL the gem, and then it would have a chance of adding that third socket. Now, the thing to be aware of is you won't be able to add the 4th and the 5th sockets to this item, because once you VAAL an item, you can no longer modify it. You can't craft it anymore, right? It is what it is. So for instance, if we VAAL this gem right here, right now it's got 6% increased melee damage, knockback distance, fire penetration, and rage on melee hits. And in this case, it just added strength to it. So this was a pretty good outcome for this item. A person that wanted those stats would also probably be okay with getting 5 extra strength out of it. Now, on a legendary item, legendaries always come with the same stats. Sometimes they have a slightly different roll. So in this case, it has 94 to max life, but that could have been anywhere from 80 to 120. But the stats are always the same. So this one's always going to have max mana, max life, increased cast speed, but the values attached to them can roll within this range here. If you press Alt, it shows you the range that it could have rolled within, so you know if you got a good or bad version of that item. And you can use a VAAL Orb on this to potentially change these stats or add these stats. So this is one way to actually make a very unique. So put this on here. Corrupted. Now, this one is also going to break 13% more armor. Armor break is a mechanic in this game. When you break an enemy's armor, you're going to be able to do more physical damage to them, right? So since this item is clearly for a caster, right, it's got energy shield and cast speed attached to it, they're probably not going to be thrilled with the outcome of this one. And that's just the way it goes with the VAAL orb. Sometimes you get a great outcome, sometimes you get an extraordinary outcome, and sometimes you brick your item. Sometimes it will remove the one stat that was important on that item, ruining it for you. So use VAAL orbs carefully, but have fun with them also. Next, we have the Divine Orb. Divine Orbs are going to randomize the numeric values on an item. So let's say we got a weapon and we really liked it. Like this one right here, we're pretty happy with the outcome, but we noticed that when we hold Alt, it shows that we rolled on the lower end of the damage ranges that were possible here. If that was the case, if the item had the stats that you wanted on it, it just had low rolls of those stats, like it had a really low health value or really low damage value, and you wanted high values of those things on, you know, whatever item you were crafting, you could re-roll it. This would keep the same stats. So in this case, it would keep the increased physical damage and the physical damage stat lines there. It would just re-roll them, giving me the chance to get a higher number of those values. So Divine Orbs are perfect when the item has the right stats, but it just got bad rolls. Then we have an Orb of Annulment. An Orb of Annulment is this one right here. This is going to remove a random modifier from an item. So if you have an item that is almost perfect, but it's got one bad stat on it, you can go ahead and use the Orb of Annulment on that item to try and remove the stat that you didn't like. So you could try to add a better one on top of it. However, just be warned, this could just as easily remove the good stat on that item that you're really happy with. So this is another crafting material that can brick an item if you use it. Next, we have the Orb of Chance. Orb of Chance is going to unpredictably upgrade a normal item to a unique rarity or destroy it. So if you're a gambling man and you know the base of an item, for instance, this is a two-handed mace right here. This item right here is a two-handed mace. So if we found a white two-handed mace, we could try to use an Orb of Chance to turn that white two-handed mace into this Chobber Chabber leaden great hammer. If it fails, it evaporates. Next, you have the Mirror of Kalandra, this one right here. This creates a mirrored copy of an item. So basically, if you found the most perfect item in the game, right? It just, every stat was the stat that should be on the item, and it was the highest roll possible for that stat, that would be a time where someone might want to use a mirror on it so that you can duplicate it. Now, instead of having one of that item, you have two. So a mirror just basically duplicates an item. Next crafting material here is the ARCANIST'S Etcher. This improves the quality of wands, staffs, or scepters. So when you get a really good one of those things, you'd want to use some of these on it to max out its quality. As you can see here, I've increased the quality to 20% on this weapon using the whetstones, because whetstones work on martial weapons. And what that does is increase the damage values on that weapon. So for instance, if we use one on this great hammer, which currently does 108 to 146 damage, now it does 111 to 149 damage, and its quality went up to 2%. And notice when we use this, the stats down below are not changing. We're not increasing the 100 to max mana down there or the 5% to critical hit chance. This is just increasing the damage that the weapon does at the top. So that's what the ARCANIST'S Etcher and the Blacksmith's Whetstone do. We touched on the armor scraps earlier. This increases the armor, evasion, and energy shield values on an item. So if we do this, we are taking those values up on this item here, and you can use Blacksmith's Whetstones on any piece of armor. So your helmet, your body, your gloves, and your boots. You cannot use it on your belt or your jewelry or your flasks. The Artificer Orb is the one that adds a socket to an item. So you just right click on it, then you click on the item you want to add sockets to. You can add one socket to your gloves, your boots, and your helmet. You can add two sockets to your weapon, if it's a two-handed weapon, and you can add two sockets to your body armor. You cannot add sockets to your belt. Scroll of Wisdoms, these are going to identify an item. You'll find a magic item or a rare item, and this identifies it for you so that you know what the stats on it are. The Jeweler Orbs are going to add support gem sockets to your gems. So right here it says adds a support gem socket to a skill with 2 support gem sockets. So if we look at this skill, Cluster Grenade, I've got 2 support gem sockets. And if I use this on it, now it has 3 support gem sockets. In order to add a 4th support gem socket, we have to find this next one here, which is a Greater Jeweler's Orb. And in order to add the 6th and final socket, we have to find that perfect Jeweler's Orb right here. These are single use. So in order to add more sockets to more of them, you're going to have to find more. You'll find plenty of lesser jeweler orbs. The greater and the perfect ones are very rare though. Next, we have the GEMCUTTE'R's Prism. This improves the quality of a skill gem. Now, what that means is different for every gem. So if we use this right now on my explosive grenade, for example, this is my primary damage dealing ability on this character. Right now, the quality on it is 15%. So I've already put 3 of these in. It takes it up 5% at a time. So what it's done is it's added 15% increased cooldown recovery rate. So if I put one more in there, now it's at 20% and it's got 20% increased cooldown recovery rate. As I mentioned, this is different for every gem. So it's giving this one cooldown recovery. So when we used it on our explosive shot here, it added 7% magnitude of ignite inflicted. So basically it's buffing our ignites. And if you want to know what quality will do to an item, you just hover over it, hold Alt down, and it tells you additional effects from quality. Here it says quality will add between 0 and 30%. So 0% when it's got 0 quality and 30% when it's got 20% quality. More magnitude of ignite inflicted. Explosive here it says it'll add 0 to 20% increased cooldown recovery rate. Right now we've got a max quality of 20%, so it's adding that 20% cooldown recovery. So before you start using your gem cutter prisms, make sure that you check and see what the additional effects would be from improving the quality of that gem. The next material we've got here is the GLASSBLOWER'S Bauble. So the GLASSBLOWER'S Bauble is going to improve the quality of a flask. You've got these 2 flasks here, your health and your mana. And if you use this on it, what it's going to do is improve the values on that flask. So for instance, if we use this on this flask right here, it goes from doing 920 over 3 seconds and 21% recovery applied instantly and 0.2 charges per second to 938 life over 3 seconds. So the quality has increased the amount of life recovered over 3 seconds, but it did not change the stats down below. As for shards, you get a stack of 10 of the shards and then it turns into that item. You're going to find these shards from enemies when you're killing them out in maps. You're going to find these shards from disenchanting at the NPC we talked about earlier. And that does it for the primary crafting materials in the game. Another recipe to be aware of is you can grab 3 of these essences. Essences are something you're going to find out in the game. You'll find a trapped mob. It looks like it's frozen in ice. You click on it 3 times and that frees it. So before you click on it 3 times, if you can, place any damage down, whether it's an AoE or a dot or delayed explosives, put them on the ground and then click that thing 3 times and it'll free it and you kill it and it drops these essences. Now, you're not always going to get the ones that you need. So what you can do is you can come here and you can reforge this. So if you had upgrades a normal item to a magic one with a mana modifier, well, maybe we don't want a mana modifier because we're not using a lot of mana on our build. Reforge it and it gives us upgrades a normal item to a magic one with a defense modifier. Okay, maybe that's something we need more. So these work a little bit like orbs of transmutation, right? They both upgrade a normal item to a magic item, but Essence has more control. You are guaranteeing what you're going to get. So this one right here, Essence of the Body, is guaranteeing that one of the modifiers will be life, increased to your life. And everybody's looking for more life on their gear, so that one can be very useful. It just gives you a little bit more control, removes a little bit of the randomness. So typically what you would do is you would find an item that has a really good base, right? So if you find a really high level bow, and then you would put upgrades a normal item to a magic one with an attack modifier on there to try to turn that really high item level bow into a really good bow, rather than simply using your orb of transmutation and then maybe you accidentally just add mana to your bow, which you didn't need at all. You needed physical damage or elemental damage or something like that. So that's how essences work. This is what the Essence stash tab looks like if you buy it. As with all tabs, you can always wait until it goes on sale. They have a sale every season for stash tabs, and you can usually pick it up for really cheap. Now, the next crafting materials we should talk about come from the Delerium League. So you'll see Deleriums in the game. You'll see them on your map. If we look at the map, we can see this symbol right here. That means that the area contains a Delerium mirror. You run through that, you kill as many enemies as possible, as fast as possible. The more you kill, the better the rewards will be when it expires. That's how you get these ingredients right here. And these are distilled emotions. You've got distilled ire, guilt, greed, and so on. And you use these for a really, really incredible use. These are going to give you a notable passive on the skill tree without pathing all the way over to it. So if I'm a mercenary down here, but I want a notable all the way up here, like if I wanted refocus, well, what I do is we hover over it, we examine refocus. So right now you have to press Alt and then hover over it. If you press Alt after you hover over it, it doesn't work. I think this is a temporary glitch. So hold Alt, then hover over it. And now you can see distilled emotions needed are paranoia, suffering, and ire. And the important thing to know is that you have to put them in that order. So paranoia, suffering, and ire, right? You'd want to put those in that order. And how do we do that? Well, you take them out of your stash, then you right click on one and it brings up this menu here. And then you'd put them in here. And if you put the right ingredients in the right order and the amulet that you want to put the notable onto, it's going to add that notable to that amulet. If we put these ones on there, it says I would get 80% increased stun recovery from back in action notable. So this is a really powerful system. Don't sleep on this. You're going to want to find out which distilled emotions you need to get the notable that you need. In this case, here's back in action right here. So I could have slapped this onto that amulet without even pathing over to it. So if there was a node you went way out of your way to get, this could be a great way to save all those travel nodes that you had to invest into to get that one node. Instead, just find out what emotions it needs, hold Alt, hover over it, or examine it if you're on console, and look at the distilled emotions and the order that you would need to place them to get that notable unlocked. You can put it on an amulet, and you can also put waystones in here and add delirium effects to your waystones to make sure that the waystone that you run has a delirium inside. And then it tells you here what each of those is going to add to that waystone. To get to the delirium crafting menu here, you just have to right click on a distilled fear. So if we open up our inventory, right click, it brings up this menu. Now you can put the item in that you want to distill, whether it's your amulet for a notable node on your passive tree, or whether it's a waystone to add delirium to it and other modifiers. There you go. Now let's talk about how the passive tree works. So you've got this massive passive tree here, and you'll quickly realize that it's not nearly as big as it looks. There's a lot of nodes on here that are simply not applicable to the build that you're making. So if you're running a crossbow, for example, then nodes like this right here that improve dual wielding are completely irrelevant. You can ignore those. And an easy way to find nodes that are relevant to your build, like for instance, if we knew we were going to do fire damage and we wanted to look for nodes doing fire damage, you could just type fire here and you can quickly see all the nodes that you'd want to consider pathing to, because they're going to affect fire in some way. So these ones over here increase the area of effect, burning enemies you kill, 5% chance to explode. This one here, gain 8% of damage as extra fire damage, 20% to fire resistance. So if you decide to be brave enough to create your own build, which I highly encourage you to do, I think that you can do it in Path of Exile 2 more than you ever could in Path of Exile 1. It's not that hard. Just grab nodes that look relevant, take the offensive nodes when things aren't dying fast, and take some defensive nodes when you start dying too fast, and you should be all right. You've got your small nodes right here, like this one, these little round ones. You've got notables like this right here. They're slightly bigger. These are the ones that you can create with distilled emotions rather than pathing over to them. You can get one of those on your amulet. Then you've got travel nodes. These are attribute nodes. So you click on this and you get to choose which attribute you want. This is how you're going to meet the requirements that your gear has on it. So your gear, you look at this piece of gear, it requires 70 strength and 70 dex. How do I get 70 strength and 70 dex? Well, there's a few different ways. One is from these travel nodes. As I'm traveling through it, if I realize I need more strength, I can choose strength nodes. If I realize I need intelligence for a certain piece of gear, like this one right here required 57 intelligence, I can go ahead and spec into a little bit of intelligence to help meet those requirements. Alternatively, I could find pieces of gear with that stat on it. So this piece of gear right here itself has 28 intelligence on it, right? So there's two different ways to meet the requirements of the gear. You can use the gear itself, or you can use these travel nodes to get to those attribute requirements. One of the less common ones are going to be these nodes right here. So you'll see these jewel sockets, and you can put jewels in these. Jewels are interesting because jewels can provide a lot of power because they have 4 different stats on them, and you can find 4 incredible stats to put on these. And there's quite a few sockets on the tree. Here's another one, here's one, and here's one, right? So you can path to a lot of them if you want to lean into sockets for extra damage. Socket nodes tend to be less useful early on in the game because you don't have good jewels and you don't have access to good jewels. But later in the game, when you have the currency or the time to have found great jewels, they can be incredibly beneficial to your build. And then finally, we have what are called key passives. These ones you cannot get with distilled emotions. You can see if I hover over it, that doesn't come up where it tells me which emotions I would need to add this to an amulet. That's not an option for these ones. These are build defining nodes. In this case, it converts all evasion to armor, or in this one here, dodge roll cannot avoid damage, but you take 30% less damage from hits while dodge rolling. So these can have massive impacts on your build, and you want to take them with caution because it can provide a really powerful effect, but it can also provide a really powerful downside as well. One thing to note about the passive tree is they've done a good job this time around of making it kind of easy to look for things that are relevant to you. So if you're using a crossbow, well, where would you look for some crossbow passives at? Maybe down here on this section that's shaped as a crossbow, right? Alternatively, you can always search crossbow, and anything that is relevant to that search will be blinking. You can see that these all have to do with crossbow, but a crossbow is not just a crossbow, right? It's also a two-handed weapon. So we could search and see, are there any two-handed weapon nodes? And this one's blinking right here, right? Because we did grab this 40% increased damage with two-hand weapons. So when you're searching for relevant nodes, just be aware of all the different ways that you might find passives for that type of damage. Fire damage is also elemental damage, right? So if you wanted to look for all the fire damage nodes, and then you wanted to look for the elemental damage nodes, and you'd see, oh, 40% increased elemental damage. So this is increasing your fire damage attacks as well, right? So there's always multiple ways to describe what you're doing. And an easy way to tell what those are is to hover over the skill. This one right here, my explosive grenade falls into the following categories so that I could search on there: area of effect, projectile, grenade, fire, duration, and detonator. So we could look for things that modify those things. You could search the passive tree for many of those and find many of them. And then you path towards them and you end up with a pretty powerful build as a result. So briefly, the way ascending is going to work is you're going to get the first 4 points while progressing through the campaign. So you'll get 1, 2 by doing one trial, and then you'll get 3 and 4 by completing another trial. And then in the end game, as in once you get to maps after the campaign, you're going to be able to get your 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th point, or wherever you decide to spend those on whatever tree you have in front of you. Your first 4 points you'll earn in the campaign. Your last 4 points you'll earn in the end game while you're mapping. So if we open up the map here, the way you're going to get your first 2 points is by traveling to the Trial of Sekimus. But before you go there, you have to go to Trader's Passage, and you're going to have to kill Babala, the traitor. Once you do that, they're going to drop one of these tokens, like this right here. You'll then be able to head over here to Trial of Sekimus, and from there you'll walk up to this pedestal, you'll put the key in, and here is where the strategy comes in when completing this trial. And by the way, this trial is much easier than the other trial, in my opinion. The other trial is called Trial of Chaos, and that's going to be in Act 3. You're going to have to do both at least once, because you get your first 2 points from one and you get your second 2 points from the other. So the game makes you do each one once to get your first 4 points. After that, for points 5, 6, 7, and 8, you can either do them all in Trial of Sekimus, this one right here, or you can do them all in Trial of Chaos. And right now, Trial of Sekimus is the easier one because of this progression system right here, the relics. So every time you run this, it gets easier because you're going to collect relics on your run, and then you'll be able to slot them in here. And these relics make it much easier. So the name of the game when you're running through here is to not run out of honor. And so for that reason, you want to choose relics that do 2 things. They increase your honor resistance, aka they decrease the amount of damage your honor takes every time something hits you, and you want it to also increase your maximum honor so that the amount of honor you walk in there with, honor is just another word for HP when you're in there, basically. So the amount of honor that you walk in there with is higher because you have these right here. See this one right here? This one gives me honor resistance and maximum honor. This one gives me honor resistance and maximum honor. And that adds up really fast, that honor resistance. There's 15 honor resistance here, 16 honor resistance here. That's 30 honor resistance. Here's another 18 honor resistance, right? And so when something hits me, I hardly lose any honor at all in there. And that is how you're going to get through the later stages of this to get your 3rd ascendancy and your 4th ascendancy, which are going to give you your 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8 points to spend in here. That is the strategy I would employ. If you're someone that's looking to get your 3rd and 4th ascensions, this is the place to do it. It's a lot easier than the Trial of Chaos right now. Speaking of the Trial of Chaos, that's going to be in Act 3. So in Act 3, up here, you see this little cave, click on that, and then up here, you've got the Temple of Chaos. So here is where you will take these. You'll find inscribed ultimatum tokens. Now, you'll take those to the Temple of Chaos, stick them in, and I'll go into more detail about how the Temple of Chaos works. But before I did that, I just wanted to let you know that as of right now, this is 1,000 times easier than the Temple of Chaos. I think that I think the Temple of Chaos is due for some balancing, to be honest with you. It's just really painful to work your way through that thing in comparison to the Trial of Sekhmet. If you don't have a lot of relics to put in here yet, don't worry. Just run through here, get as far as you can. Don't expect to get your third ascension on the first try. It is quite difficult. After you've run a few times, killed a few enemies in there, you're going to get some really decent relics. And remember that you can craft these. So if you get one that only has one stat on it, you can use an orb on it to add another stat, just like you could to a piece of armor, right? And turn these into really decent relics. Another thing that you can do that is really useful is you can go to your forge, right? Where we combine items to make a new item. This one's not good enough and this one's not good enough, right? So we can put these three in the reforge and then hope we get one that has something like this on it where it's honor resistance and increased maximum honor on one of these. If you get a bunch that aren't great, you can reforge them and hopefully get one that is out of that. And that's a nice way to re-roll the ones that you have. And just a reminder, the last thing to be aware of is when you hover over one of these keys, because you'll find tons of these while you're playing through the game. And if it does not say right there, it says completing this ascension trial will not grant additional ascendancy skill points. If it doesn't say that it will grant additional skill points, then you're just running it for the loot. You're not going to get ascension skill points. So while you're running maps, you'll be looking for these to drop in a version that says it will give you ascendancy skill points. Now let's talk about ascendancies. So every class has 3 ascendancies. At the start of early access, every class only has 2. The third one is going to be added later. So you'll choose between your 2 ascendancies that you have access to now or the 3 that you have access to in the future. And your ascendancy is going to give you a massive amount of power. One of the most powerful words that you can see in Path of Exile is more. There's 2 different ways to describe the damage that's being added from a stat. It can either be more damage or it can be increased damage. Anytime you see the word more, that means it's multiplied times your damage. So rather than being added to a stat bucket like increased is, where they all get added together and then multiplied to your damage value, more is simply multiplied. The takeaway from that is more is way better than increased. So when you see a node say it does more damage, you want to look at that and you want to consider grabbing it if you can. So here's a node from this ascendancy that says it's dealing up to 30% more damage to enemies, right? So it's a big multiplier, and that's why it's tucked into our ascendancy. Classes are not really important in this game. Classes just determine where you start at on this passive tree. The mercenary starts here, but the mercenary could path into the nodes of any other class. What the mercenary is limited to is its ascendancy. So when you create your character, you're not choosing a class, you're choosing an ascendancy, because the ascendancy is the only thing you can't change once you pick it, and they're the only nodes that you can't access unless you choose that ascendancy. So you're not choosing a mercenary, you're choosing a witch hunter or a gemling. That's just something to kind of be aware of. So you'll see someone create a witch and start up here, and then they'll path down over here and do something weird, right? Your class is just your starting spot, but your ascendancy is what defines your build. So how do you ascend? Well, you're going to need to ascend 4 different times. Each time you ascend, you get 2 points to spend in here. So 1, 2, 3, 4. This character has ascended twice. How do we ascend? Well, there's a couple different ways to do it. The first one is going to be in Act 2. So you get to Act 2, you're going to go to Trader's Passage, you're going to kill the side boss in there. It's going to drop one of these bad boys right here. Then you'll be able to take that here to the Trial of Sekhmet, which is where we're at now. And when in here, you'll be able to walk up to this, put this in here, and it allows you to put relics in here. Relics that you'll find while running through here. So each time you run through here, you'll hopefully find some better relics, and these slots will open up as you complete the different places. It says complete the test of time, complete the test of time, complete the test of cunning, right, to unlock these. So you'll complete those tests and you'll unlock more slots so that you can fit more relics in here. Relics will do things like make you take less damage, make enemies take more damage, increase your move speed. I mean, the options are many. Ultimately, what they're doing is making it easier for you to get farther the next time you try, right? These are kind of your carryover power from one attempt to the next, so that you hopefully do better than you did the last time and have a better chance of getting to the end where all the loot is. As you find the relics, you can store them in a relic locker here. And these relics can be crafted, by the way, just like anything else in this game. You can use your crafting materials on these to improve them. So for instance, I like this 4% increased move speed. We could come back here, we could add another stat to it, and we got 7% increased quantity of relics drops by monsters. So we can come to our altar here, place that in there. Now, once you've got the relics that you want to place in here, you can go ahead and start it, and you enter the first door. One of the types of puzzles that you'll encounter is this one right here, the Death Crystal. This, you just run from crystal to crystal. I don't recommend wasting time attacking anything because if you run out of time, you fail. So much easier just to avoid everything. Touch the crystal. You'll see the beam of light that leaves each time you touch. That's telling you which direction the next one is located in. Sometimes there will be 3 beams of light. I always tend to follow the left or the right one when that happens. And then just keep following the left beam until I've touched them all. There, on this one, it's all done. Now you notice the enemies don't disappear. This is important because the objective in here is to not get touched. You have honor, and while your healing potion can heal your health, it will not heal your honor. And once your honor hits 0, you fail the trial, which is big sad. So you don't want to do that. We've got an honor thing here. We could use 5 of the water that we get from killing enemies in here to restore 466 of our missing honor. This is a nice one to have between rounds because that's what really can help you stay alive. Then you'll have this. So after you complete each round of this, and you'll notice you have to complete quite a few of these to get to the end, and at the end you'll face off with a boss, you'll have to choose your path. So you're going to kind of look ahead. Where do I want to get? Do I want to get keys to open up more chests at the very end? Do I want to make it easier on myself and focus on getting back honor in between rounds? I think the main thing that you want to do is avoid negative afflictions. Like this one right here, it says you get a bronze key, but you get an affliction that reduces your damage by 40%. That is huge. That's a huge pain. And any buffs that you're giving to the enemies, realize that those buffs, like this one right here, monsters have 25% increased attack, cast, and movement speed. That's also being applied to the boss at the end. So it's very easy to put yourself in a situation as you're going through here where you cannot beat the boss at the end, or you can't even get to it because you've debuffed yourself so many times and you've buffed the enemy so many times that it's now more or less unplayable. And the unfortunate thing about this is that really comes down to RNG. Sometimes there just isn't a great option. Like right now, I don't love any of these options, but we'll go ahead and choose one. Here, we'll take this one. Now you'll see a blood chalice like this from time to time. What you do here is you click on it and then blood goes out, and that's telling you where the 2 rare enemies are that are located in here. Sometimes it'll be 2, sometimes it'll be more. And remember, you just want to do this without getting hit. You're basically trying to play through this like it's a no hit, because any damage you take to your honor doesn't come back. Sometimes you'll get to the end of a round and you'll get a bronze key. You'll be able to collect those and open up a chest at the end. In this one, you're going to run up to these portals and kill the summoning people. As soon as you disable all the portals that the enemies are coming through, the trial is complete. Sometimes you'll run into spikes like this. When it's vibrating, that means you can stand on it, but you do want to get off of it soon. So it's vibrating, get off, and it means the spike's about to come up. So that's how you get through those. There will be a lot of obstacles in some of them like this, where there's the flamethrower that you have to walk around. There's the spikes coming out of the ground, and you're just trying to get through it without taking damage. So slow and steady wins the race here. If you go fast and take damage, you're really going to regret it later on when you need those honor points for the boss fight, right? You want to go into that boss fight at the end with as many honor points as you can. Killing mobs can be nice because sometimes they'll drop silver keys or even gold keys for you, which can greatly increase the amount of loot that you get at the end of this thing. But every time you do that, you're taking a chance of taking more damage than you would have, making that final boss fight even harder. Now, after you kill enemies, be aware of, see the little glowing piles? They're real easy to miss when you're cruising through here. You want to run over those. That's the water that you can use, and you can spend that at merchants that pop up along the way in here sometimes, or you can spend it at these fountains. Right here, you'll see this one costs 5 of that currency. I currently have 607 of it down here. You can see that. You can also see how many bronze keys, silver keys, and gold keys I've collected so far in this run. Now, I'm missing a bit of honor, so we can use this fountain between these rounds here to get it back. Great trade, always worth giving up 5 water to get your honor back. And now for the boss fight. Be careful against this guy. Getting close to him can be really dangerous, especially when he's pounding the ground. So just watch out for that attack. He'll probably do it right at the beginning here. Likes to open with it. Yeah, there he goes. So stay back when he does that, and then remember to take as little damage as possible. There we go. And just like that, we've killed him. Now watch out. You can still take a little bit of damage from some stuff here occasionally. Get your rewards. And now we beat this area. And if it was your first time, you'd be able to come here and ascend. And that would be how you get your first ascendancy. I've already got my first 2 ascendancies, so I cannot ascend here. I actually have to make it farther than this. But look at all these chests. I have 1 bronze, 2 silver, 2 gold keys. So I've got all of these that I can open. I can choose different types. So do I need gloves, or do I want to take my chances with a mysterious cache? You know, I could always use better gloves, I think. Advanced intricate gloves. Okay, not great. Ooh, these, okay. 11% increased attack speed, life increased attack speed, and lightning resist. Not too shabby. Okay. Silver I should have started with the bronze. I started with the best. Now it's downhill from here. So we're going to open, go with a mysterious cache. Ooh, we got an exalted orb. Nice. That was worth it. And the bronze just gave us a white socketed item. Okay. So we've completed this first phase of this, right? And now what if I want to ascend again? And if we look up here in the top left, we can see all the debuffs that we've accrued so far. We get 50% less sacred water. We take 102 physical damage whenever we complete a room, and monster actions cannot be slowed, and they have 25% increased attack, cast, and movement speed. Oof. Then here we can also see our boons that we've gained here. Fountain of Youth, restore 127 of your honor when you venerate a Marketh's shrine. Now we can click on this door at the end of the room and go to the next one. In this phase, everything's going to be a little bit harder. Traps, the enemies, all of it. So again, you're going to try to pick the safest path possible to get to the end and fight this boss. You want to get there with as much honor as possible, and you want to kill them with as much honor as possible so that you can do it again to get to the next stage. Right now, we're in the test of will. Remember how I was saying in order to unlock more spots for your relics, you needed to pass the tests? Well, here's the tests of will. And when we get past this, there'll be another test. Some rooms will have these traps right here. Just move in the same direction as the trap, and you'll be able to navigate those pretty easily. Watch out for these explosions. When you get one like this, where you flip over an hourglass, you just need to survive for a minute and a half. So the best way to do that is, well, just don't get hit. If you can kill things while you're running around, go for it. But whatever you do, try to conserve your honor. The second ascension that you do is going to be here in the Temple of Chaos. So you'll click on that, and then you'll go here to the Temple of Chaos. In this temple, you're going to use the inscribed ultimatum keys. Bring it up to the statue, put it in, open it up. Now, the other one's hard because it uses your honor and you can't simply heal it anytime you want. This one's hard because you're constantly getting debuffs placed on you all the way through. So you constantly walk up to one of these at the beginning of each round, and you have to choose which one you want to take. Monsters gain 20% increased skill speed. In each encounter room, damage taken will go up slowly, all the way up to 50%. Or the third option here is rare monsters have 2 additional modifiers, 30% increased rare monsters. So none of these are great to have to deal with, but we've got to pick one, and it's a random set of 3 every time. So I guess we'll take monsters have 20% more skill speed. You'll run into the room. Guy will show up. He'll freeze time, place the enemies inside, and prepare it for your entrance here. And there you go. On the right side here, it's always going to tell you what your objective is. So if you walk into a room and you're not sure what you're supposed to be doing, just take a glance over here and it'll tell you. Right now it says survive until the timer expires. So go ahead and do that. Sometimes you'll walk into a room like this where there's 3 stone altars. You'll have to go and find the cores and bring them back. They look like this right here. See it pop up on your back, and then it's going to apply a dot to you. The longer you hold it, the more that dot hurts. So you want to get back and set it down ASAP. There is an animation, and they can attack you the whole time you're doing it. So make sure there's not too many mobs hitting you while you're placing the stone down. It can be a really frustrating way to die. In top left, you can see that dot counting up here if you're ever curious how strong it is at the moment. Once you've got all 3 down, you can head on up to the next phase. When you're trying to choose which ones to deal with, the ones that end up with you dying faster are almost always the worst choice. So monsters granting no flask and charm charges, it seems pretty dangerous. You run out and you're done. Blood globules is pretty harmless. We'll do this one. They just fall down and hit you if you stand under them when they fall. Eventually you'll get to a boss. Go ahead and kill it. You'll fight 2 bosses. You don't know which one you're going to get first. Kill the boss and move on to the next stage. That's the halfway point. Impending doom is a real pain to deal with. Sometimes the arena that you are put in is barely bigger than the circle that is placed on the ground, and this one can be a really easy way to die. So until this gets nerfed, I would avoid it. Damage ramping up to 50% increase just seems like a nightmare to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and take blood globules level 2 and really try to avoid letting those things hit me. This one says kill all enemies. Okay. There was that blood globule behind me a second ago. Easy enough to avoid. There it is again. And if you can't find the last ones, just open up your map and you can see them right there. When you're looking for the exit, you can see it here on the minimap. You'll see that symbol. That's where you're heading towards. For this one, you'll see these red circles on the ground. It says sacrifice monsters to the altars by slaying them in the blood circle. So just stand in the circle, best of your ability, and kill monsters in the circle. Eventually, the circle will go from red to gray. You've completed that one. There it is. It's grayed out now. See it? It's not red anymore, so we're done. Usually you have to do 3 of those. And eventually you'll get to the final boss of the run. Be tucked up here. Once you kill him, pick up your loot and head to the trial rewards. And this is where you can get some unique charms. These go in the sockets that you can put in your gear and your weapons. This one here is giving +5 to all resistances, and this one here is converting 20% of the requirements to dexterity. So you can get something very different than what you normally have with your runes. The gear that you get here will be corrupted, which means you cannot modify it. You either like it as it is or you don't like it. Then you'll run past your rewards and back here to claim your ascension. If you have the appropriate key, you'll be able to head over here and continue on. When it comes to doing your trials, you can hover over the items and they'll tell you if they are capable of giving you ascendancy points. So right here, it says completing this ascension trial will grant additional ascendancy skill points. You have to complete all 3 trials of Sekhmet to get those ascension points though. This one right here, it says area of level 69, number of trials 7, completing this ascension trial will not grant additional ascendancy skill points. So this one you would just be doing for the loot that you get in the process of doing it, not for actually ascending. So loot that you get from the inscribed ultimatums includes things like this right here, these new types of runes that you can suck it into your gear. Next, let's talk about the end game known as mapping, although in this game they call it waystones. So will people call it waystoning? I doubt it. So here's what it is. You're going to get a map device like this one initially. You're first going to get access to this system when you make it to the Ziggurat Refuge in the past. So that's right here. If you ever leave this location, it can be kind of confusing on how you get back. So the way you do that is you go to a waypoint and then you come here to the Ziggurat Refuge Pass. This is where the end game starts for you until you've got a hideout. And I'll talk about how to get a hideout next. So here you'll have all your essential NPCs, just like before. You've got NPCs you can buy from. You've got NPCs that will refund your passives. You can also buy from. You can gamble from Malva again. And you've got your NPC that will disenchant your items. So all that good stuff is here. And up here at the top, you've got a map device. This is the most important part. I just noticed they call it a map device, even though it's waystones now. Yeah, we're definitely calling it mapping again. So in the map, you'll start here at this device right here. When you open up the map, and you're going to work your way out to these places. And depending on what the region looks like, so as you might guess, this is going to be a desert map. This is going to be more of a swampy forest map, you know, in terms of the biome that you're facing off with. Now, the enemies inside are going to be completely randomized each time. So every time you go into a map, you're going to get new types of enemies, a new combination of enemies. And a lot of times that'll determine how difficult that map is, along with a few other factors. So other things that can determine how difficult a map is are what other encounters might exist within that map. So for instance, as you progress through this map, right, the ones that are green are the ones that I have done. The ones that are blue are the ones that I have not yet done. So if we worked our way through all these points and we got to this one right here, and the next one here has this right here. So if you click on the map, it'll bring up this thing and you can hover over it. It says area contains a ritual. So if you're ever not sure what the marker over top of it means, click on it and then hover over this. Area has +1 to monster level and coalesced corruption. We look at that. It says monsters slain close together have a chance to merge together and manifest powerful monsters. So basically, when you see this symbol, like it says, if you kill a big pack of monsters really quickly, then there's a chance they will merge into one mega monster that spawns and you have to fight that. And those can be pretty dangerous, so watch out for those. In my experience, ritual has been the most dangerous encounter because it locks you in a confined space, and sometimes those confined spaces can be really small. And by the time you get to the 3rd or 4th ritual in that zone, because of the way rituals work, and each time you get to the next ritual, you're fighting all of the mobs that were spawned in the ritual before, as well as the one that you're in currently. So by the 4th one, you're fighting against 4 different rituals worth of mobs. It can be pretty hectic. And if it's a small area that it locks you into, it can be very deadly. So that's ritual. And that's how you can tell what modifiers are over top of the zone. You're going to have here, this symbol right here is going to be a delirium. When you see this, that's delirium. This symbol right here is going to be breach. You walk over a hand and mobs will spawn. The faster you kill them, the longer the breach lasts and the more rewards you get in the process. This symbol right here means there's a boss encounter in that zone, and you go and you kill the boss and hopefully get some decent loot from it. This symbol right here is an expedition. So you'll have to go in and plant explosives, which will expose chests, but it'll also spawn a bunch of mobs for you to kill in the process. Another icon that you'll sometimes see on the map is this one right here. If you go there, there'll be a traveling merchant that you can buy things from. So when you see that, definitely swing on by and see what he's offering. And then last but not least, as far as the icons go, one to watch out for is this one here. When you see one of these, I would make your way to it. This is going to unlock a hideout. So as you're playing through the game and unlocking hideouts, you'll be able to select one as your hideout. So when you get a hideout, you can go to it by clicking this button right here. When you go to the waypoint, click this, travel to hideout. And now you'll be in one of the hideouts that you've unlocked. You can always talk to Alva if you want to select a different hideout with a different look to it. Inside of your hideout will be all of your essentials. You've got your identify items, refund atlas passives. We'll talk about the atlas in a moment. You've got your crafting bench, your chests, everything, all the essential NPCs, and a well to refill your potions, and a map device, the ever important map device. So this is where you'll come and you'll put waystones in here. Waystones are going to come in a variety of different levels. You'll start at 1 and you'll work your way up. The higher the level of the map, higher the level of the monsters in that zone. So the monsters in the zone that you create will be determined by the level of the map that you create. So what we would do is we'd come up to the map device, we'd click on a zone that is adjacent to one that we've completed, we'd put the map in there, and now we can click traverse, and that'll open up 6 portals to that zone. 6 portals means that you can enter it 6 different times. Every time you use a portal, if we go through this one right here, and then we go back out, now there's only 1 portal left, right? And so you have a finite number of times that you can come back and offload gear and refill your potions, which is the only reason you would come back, because if you die, you lose that map. All the portals that go back in disappear and you respawn in your hideout and you lose access to that map. When you fail a map by dying, what happens is that location still remains, but in this case, for the fortress, you would still be able to try it again with a new waystone. You would lose the waystone. You would also lose the corrupted modifier on top of it. So it would just be a blank map, kind of like this one right here with no modifier sitting over top of it. So those are the things that happen when you die. You lose the modifier on that map, whether it is corrupted, whether it's delirium or ritual, right? That'll be gone and it won't be there anymore, but you'll have to go in and clear it again without that. You'll also lose the waystone that you used to unlock that point, and you'll also lose 15% experience when you die. So those are 3 different things that you lose for dying, and the reason why you really want to try to avoid dying when you're playing Path of Exile once you get to maps. Now, one other thing that you'll notice on your map are these giant lost towers. So one of the things that you can do is work your way to a lost tower. When you do that, you'll put a map in and you'll have to clear it like any other zone. And when you get to the end, it's going to expose the area around it. So you get visibility of the nodes in a circle around that lost tower. Furthermore, once you've cleared it, it'll look like this. It'll say map completed, and it'll now have 1 square that you can put an object in. So what you would be able to do is you'd be able to put one of these precursor items in there. They look like this. These, just like waystones, can be crafted. You should never run white waystones, by the way. You always want to, at minimum, use a orb of transmutation and then an orb of augmentation to get a couple of stats on it, like this. And if you look at that there, it says waystone drop chance increased by 100%. This is essential because it's real easy to run out of waystones, especially run out of waystones that are the tier that you're looking for. So if you're deeper into the system and you're looking for waystone tier 9, you really want to make sure you're juicing your maps as best you can by using, at minimum, orb of transmutation, orb of augmentation, and then a regal orb on it. So I regal every map that I run, and I find that I'm sustaining myself that way. I always get at least 1 regal back when I run the map. It comes in as a drop, and so I'm not running out of regals as I work my way through the mapping system. Now, on the right side, as you're doing that, you're gonna have this goal here. It says complete tier 8 maps, 1 out of 8, or however many you've done so far. What that means is you need to use any waystone that is tier 8 or above. So this tier 9 would work. If I put that into a map, right? If I put that tier 9 in here, traversed it, and cleared it successfully without dying, I would get credit for that, and then it would go up to 2 out of 8. So any map that is tier 8 or above would be just fine. What happens when you complete the 8? 2 things happen. One is Doriani here will give you 2 points to spend in your Atlas skill tree right here. So if you want to find that, it's right here. Click this Atlas skill tree, or you can press Control U if you're on PC. Now your Atlas skill tree is going to provide buffs to all of the maps that you run. It'll increase the amount of waystones that drop. It'll increase the chance of them being a higher tier when they do drop. It'll increase the effect of modifiers, or you can choose to spec into having it give you more essences. You can have it give you more loot in general, like this one here, increase quantity of items found in your maps. And then if you head over this way, you get more strong boxes, right? So there's lots of different ways that you can go in this to make maps maps more rewarding for yourself. As the game currently stands, I highly recommend working your way here to increase rarity of whetstones as well as increase quantity of whetstones. This is really important because this is going to help you sustain your maps so that you can keep running them back to back. Maps don't take that long. When you run one, it's going to take you maybe 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, you know, depending on your build. So the key kind of becomes efficiency. As long as you have more whetstones for you to run and you don't run out of these and you keep getting whetstones that are the appropriate level, you can keep progressing on Cataclysm's Wake over here by completing your tier 8 maps, and then you'll keep getting those passive points to spec into here. As for the mini trees around the perimeter, you'll find and complete objectives on the map. When you complete major objectives, depending on which one you complete, you'll be rewarded with skill points that you can spend in that tree. So as you find and defeat, for instance, the breach boss, you will get points that you'll be able to spend in your breach skill tree. And as we touched on earlier, make sure you use the reforging bench. So if you find yourself in a situation where, for instance, you have 3 tier 4 maps, right? But you're trying to run tier 5 maps for your Cataclysm's Wake quest over here, you can just come to the bench, make sure that all of the maps are of the same quality. So you'd want them all to be magic if one of them was. Then you come to the reforging bench, you put the 3 in here, you reforge those tier 4 maps, and boom, now you have a tier 5 map that you can run. So this is a nice, easy way to upgrade useless maps that you're getting while you're doing the higher level ones. And you can keep combining up until you get a map that's useful for you. Alternatively, depending on what point of the season you're in, these maps might be more valuable to sell to other players. If you're someone that wants to get yourself involved in the trading system, you might be able to sell each of these for as an exalted orb and then buy a new one for an exalted orb. So you'd sell the 3 that you would have combined for 3 different exalted orbs, and then that would allow you to buy 3 maps of the appropriate level for 3 different exalted orbs. So combining them could be a 2 exalt loss in the current economy. But you also don't have to deal with the hassle of trying to get someone to buy your maps and buying someone else's maps. So, you know, each player is different and they're going to handle this their own way. So after you've completed a Lost Tower, you'll have this little box here and you'll be able to put a precursor into that slot. And precursors, you can craft them just like you can craft whetstones. So I would highly recommend doing that. You know, add your orbs into it, regal it, get it into a rare item, and then slap that bad boy in there so that it can buff the maps that you're running. So if we look at this one right here, it says 5 maps in range would contain Mirrors of Delirium, as well as slaying rare monsters in the maps pauses the Delirium mirror time for 2 seconds, 11% increase rare monsters in your map. So this would be a great one to slap in there when I want to do some Delirium runs. So collecting and crafting precursors and then collecting and crafting maps is how you're going to handle your endgame system and fill this out. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It just looks a little bit complicated the first time you open it up, but it's just a very pretty way to display a very simple system. The higher the tier, the whetstone, the more rewarding it is. So you want to work your way up to those high level whetstones as soon as possible. But of course, that means monsters are getting higher level and the difficulty is ramping up very quickly as you do so. Now let's go ahead and deep dive into how Ritual works, how Delirium works, how Expeditions work, so you know how to deal with them when you run into them. Let's talk about breaches. Breaches are hands that you'll discover when you're running through one of the maps. You run over the hand, it disappears, and then a purple circle expands around it, spawning these mobs, waves and waves of them. You've got to kill them really fast, and as long as you keep killing them fast enough, the purple circle will keep expanding further and further out, and the rewards that you get will get better and better as a result. Every once in a while, you'll see a clasped hand. It's a clenched fist sticking out of the ground. Run over that to get even more rewards from it, just like that one there. And you're just going to keep going around killing the mobs. That's the name of it. If you don't kill them fast enough, you'll see the circle eventually shrink back in when you finish your breach experience. Breaches can be pretty dangerous because tons of mobs will start sprinting at you the second you touch it. So just be ready for a fight. And you're going to find these tablets that you can put into the Lost Towers to make it so that you find even more breaches in your maps. Completing breaches is going to give you unique catalysts that you'll be able to use on breach rings. Breach rings have a maximum quality of 50%, which means you'll be able to jack their quality way up and create some incredibly powerful rings. Some of the most powerful rings in the game, in fact. Now let's talk about the boss. Every one of these activities has a final boss fight. So to get to this boss, you need to find breach splinters. You get enough of them, you can turn it into a breach stone. You use that in your map device, and you'll be able to head into the boss fight. Once there, you're presented with a breach like any other, except this one is the entire map, and you have to kill enemies fast enough, long enough to get all the way to the boss at the very end. If you succeed, you'll be presented with the boss himself, and be ready for one heck of a fight in the process. Along with amazing loot, you'll get some passive points that you can spend in your atlas to further enhance your breaches. These are going to both make them more rewarding and more difficult, so be ready for a fight when you start putting points into those trees. In expeditions, you'll walk up to an area full of posts with little chest symbols on them. Basically, the goal here is place down your explosives in such a way that you explode as many of those chests as possible without creating a situation in which you're unable to kill all of the monsters that spawn. So each of the big chests that you spawn, you'll notice on the poles, it tells you that it's going to do a positive and a negative thing. The positive thing will be, it'll have some positive effect on your loot, and the negative thing will be that it makes the monsters perhaps immune to fire or have much higher crit chance or something like that. When you do this, you're going to get currencies that you can trade with NPCs in the game. And again, these are going to give you tablets that you can place into towers to help you find more of these encounters in the world. Eventually, you might find a logbook, and if you do, you'll be able to head in there to try and encounter the final boss. This area is a massive excursion encounter. You can chain together tons and tons of explosions, but be careful because each one you chain is going to spawn more and more mobs, and it's very easy to accidentally spawn way more than you can handle, especially with each chest having the ability to buff your enemies. If you successfully get through all of that, you may get to fight the boss in the encounter, which again, if beaten, will award you with points that you can spend in your atlas. Now let's talk about rituals. Rituals are going to be these rings on the floor with a totem in the middle. You'll know they're in a map when you see this symbol right here. When you kill enemies inside of the circle, then touch the totem, it respawns those enemies. Once you've killed all of them, you're going to get some currency to spend when you interact with the ritual, and there will be multiple rituals in the zone. Each ritual you do summons monsters from the rituals before it. So by the third or fourth ritual in that zone, you're going to be fighting a ton of enemies. It also locks you into the circle that you're fighting in, so these can be really dangerous ones for you to fight. Go in cautiously. Once you get enough of the currency, you'll be able to buy items from the ritual. And rituals will even drop unique crafting currencies that allow you to remove very specific mods from your gear so that you have more control over your crafts. As with all of these types of activities, there is an endgame boss that you'll be able to fight and defeat to get extra skill points to put into your atlas. Putting points into your ritual skill tree will make it both more difficult and more rewarding. Now let's go ahead and talk about some settings that everybody should change because they're just objectively better. Every game has settings like this where the developers leave it off in order to preserve some form of immersion, when in fact, it would be more effective for you to have some of these settings turned on. So you'll go to options, press escape, go to options, click on the game tab, and then right here, click auto equip. And this way, when you pick up an item for the first time on a new character, they'll equip it. It won't just sit uselessly down here in your inventory. If you pick up a ring, your character will put it on if they're not already wearing a ring. It's just a nice one. It saves you a few clicks every time you're finding a piece of gear for the first time. Then under interface, I like to come down to the map. I turn landscape transparency down and map transparency up. And this way you get a nice outline of the area, but it's not obstructing your view in the way that it would if you had the terrain visible and all of that stuff. So I think this is the easiest way to view that minimap when it's toggled on your screen. There's screen shake if you want to disable that. Still under interface up here, we've got the items section. Scroll down just a little bit further and we've got always show sockets. I would turn that on. Show full descriptions. I would have that turned on. This way you can hover over an item that's on the ground and you can see exactly what it is rather than just its name. And sometimes you'll decide, you know what, I don't need to pick that up and put it in my inventory. Scroll down a little bit further to gameplay and I would turn on show life and mana levels. This way you can see the actual values here of how much health and mana you have. Right here, we can see how much health we have, how much mana we have. And this is just nice because it's good to know exactly how much life you have. You know when you're falling behind and when you're not. I like to have flask buffs and aura icons turned on. And that way, when you have a buff, it's up here in the top left and you can hover over it and it tells you exactly what that buff is doing for you. And same goes for debuffs. They'll show up here in the top left. And that way you just know, like if something's happening to your character, you know, because you've got these turned on. Then you've got show mini life bars above you. I would absolutely turn this on. Everybody should have this one on. I think this should almost be a default setting in the game. So you get these bars over your character, a green one for your health, a blue one there for your mana. And that way, when you're running around blasting, killing all the enemies, your eyes can stay up here in the action. and you don't have to constantly glance down here at your health, you know, okay, how's my health now? How's my health now? How's my health now? It's just really hard to look down that far into your peripheral and always know exactly how much health you have left. It's just easier if you've got this bar right here. It's right in the middle of your screen. If it starts to dip, you know it right away. So if you've been playing Path of Exile and you have died because you just didn't realize your health was getting low, hey, this will fix that for you. The next option here is show mini life bars above NPCs. I like to turn this on for allies and enemies. The main reason I like to turn this on is, one, it's nice to know how much damage you're doing to the enemy at a glance, especially when there's 10 enemies on screen. Did I just chunk them all or did I tickle them? This lets you know without hovering over each one individually. It also makes the enemies a lot more visible. Sometimes you'll be in a zone and the enemies won't be terribly easy to see, but as soon as you hit them and each one has a health bar above its head, all of a sudden it's much more obvious where the enemies you're fighting are and what you need to do to make sure that you're not standing in the middle of them. Show monster resistance icons, turn this on, and then always highlight. I like to turn this on. This way, when you walk into a room, if there's a chest in that room, you'll see the text chest on your screen. You don't have to hover over it to actually know, oh, there's a chest right there, right? So this is going to make it a lot easier to see items as well as chests and interactable objects when you walk into an area. You can scroll down a little bit further and then there's chat. You got global chat. A lot of people like to turn this off because it's just a lot of people spouting a bunch of nonsense in there. Sometimes there can be good conversation in there, or sometimes people will ask questions that actually get answers, but a lot of times it's just clutter and it might make you miss a whisper from someone that you actually wanted to care about hearing from. And so it can be nice to turn this off so that your chat's not flying by down here while you're trying to play the game. Now we go over to the input tab, and WASD is fantastic. I highly recommend taking advantage of this. This is just great on all of the ranged classes especially. And then there's this setting down here called toggle highlighting. And by default, it's bound to Z, which means it's real easy to accidentally hit it and turn off all the highlights of all the items that are dropping on the ground. So you'll be running around and you'll be like, man, nothing has dropped in a while. It's because you bumped Z and you turned off the highlighting of items that are on the ground. And so literally the text is not appearing anymore. So I moved this over to a hotkey that I can't accidentally hit while I'm playing the game, somewhere safe on the other side of the keyboard. So I've got this button bound to this bracket here. And then as mentioned, come down all the way to the bottom, you've got create a portal, bind this to something that's going to be easy for you to smash anytime you're ready to leave a zone so that you're not having to click it manually down here. Now that leads us into item filters. Item filters are a big part of Path of Exile, and they have been for a really long time. Now in Path of Exile 2, they're not nearly as needed as they were in Path of Exile 1. The developers have done a lot to minimize the amount of clutter and the amount of junk that's dropping so that the things that do drop are more likely to be useful for you. Still, as you get further into the game, your desires and your wants out of an item are going to become very specific. You're going to be looking for items of a very specific type, maybe a very specific type of weapon, or maybe you're only looking for items over a certain item level because the items that are level 53 are just useless to you at this point. Their stats are not nearly good enough, and you don't want to see those anymore because they're just a waste of your mental capacity while you're running through the game to even glance at those and consider whether or not they're worth picking up. That's where the item filter comes in. And the best part about item filter is that it can make sounds when important items drop. So right now with the never sync filter on, which is one that I highly recommend, it's the community favorite and it's one I use myself. So when something drops, like you'll hear a sound like that, or you'll hear a sound like this, right? Not much there because this is a really cheap item, whereas this item is a valuable item. And so it gets this beam and the item just looks completely different. Like you can't miss this on the ground. If there's a bunch of stuff, like you'll see this divine orb, right? And also you see little icons on the map. See these right here in the mini map right there. And you see it on this map, the map overlay. So it's really hard to miss valuable items when they drop because they're showing up visibly on the map, on your screen, and you're hearing them. You're getting audible cues thanks to your item filter. The item filter is doing all those things. So how do you get an item filter? Great question. What you do is you go to filterblade.xyz. You open up this website right here. And at the moment, Path of Exile 2 has just launched, so he doesn't have a filter up yet. Normally you can come in here and you can just create a filter, choose which one you want. Yes, okay. And then you can click export to POE and you give it a name. And usually I just name it after whatever season it is. So the season, and that way I know in the future what that is for, PC, and then I go sync or download. As long as you log into FilterBlade and connect your Path of Exile account to FilterBlade, which is totally safe, by the way, everyone does it. When you're in the game, you'll be able to come to your options, click on game, and then right here you have item filter, and you'll be able to choose the one that you just installed via this drop-down menu. So you click it and then refresh it, and then make sure you save. Click the save button. That's a real easy part to forget, because sometimes you'll come in here, you'll go to save it. Okay, and picked homebrew, great. And then you leave. Well, guess what? You didn't hit save, so it didn't actually save that. Make sure you hit the save button. Homebrew, save. There we go. Until NeverSync gets the filter up and working, all you're going to do is click on bare bones filter right here. Once you're on this page, just scroll down to where he talks about how to install, and you can download the file right here. Get the latest file from here, which will come up to this page right here. Click source code, it'll download it. Then on the how to install section we were looking at earlier, it tells you exactly where it's located. If you don't already know, just grab that, copy it. Then in your Explorer window on your PC, just paste that in there. And it'll take you right to the folder. And from here, all you have to do is drag NeverSync's filter into that folder. Now, when you go to Path of Exile options, you'll have NeverSync's filter there. You should definitely replace your filter every season because items change, parameters change, and what is important and what isn't important changes right as the game changes. So make sure you grab a new filter every season, especially at the beginning of Path of Exile 2, where so much is changing so fast. All right, now let's talk about trading in Path of Exile, because trading can go a couple of different ways. You can either be the buyer or the seller, and the process is a little bit different depending on which one you are. And sometimes there's some stuff you need before it's possible. So when you're a buyer, it's a pretty simple process. You just go to pathofexile.com, click on the Path of Exile 2 trade website, and you'll be presented with a screen that looks like this. From here, you'll choose which filters you want to search for. Make sure that you're in PO2 standard if you're playing in PO2 standard, or if you're in a league, then make sure this says the right league name, whatever league you're playing in at the time. And we'll start on the left side and then we'll go to the right side. So on the left side here, we're gonna pick our item. Most people will come here starting about the mid game and into the late game, looking for items that are going to do a couple of things for them, usually provide health and resistances. So let's say we needed a helmet because our helmet didn't have either of those things and it was just not dropping for us. So we're like, okay, you know what? We're going to have to go pick one up off the Path of Exile trade site. So we come here, put helmet in, and then we can go ahead and use any of these filters that we want. For a helmet, I would probably just come in, I would look for requirements, and I would say the max level requirement could be whatever level I am, because I want to be able to put it on after I buy it. So let's say I was level 50, right? So we'd put level 50 there. And then maybe we'll come down here to trade filters and we'll say the max buyout price we're willing to pay is 3 exalted orbs. That's as much. This is an item I'm hoping to replace really soon, you know, so we don't want to spend more than, let's go even to 2 exalts. And then we come over here and we put the stats that we're really hoping to get, right? And let's say we know we want max life. So we just, boom, right there. We're going to add maximum life. Alternatively, if the stat doesn't show up right away, you can say maximum life, and there it is. You can click on it, or you can just put maximum, and you start typing, and life's going to show up, right? There's a lot of ways to get to that one to show up. And then another thing is, let's say one of our resistances is really low. Our lightning and our cold were great, but our fire resistance wasn't. So we add fire resistance to this thing. And you know what? Let's just check and see. Maybe our cold resistance isn't quite capped out. We could use some of those too. So we put cold resistance here. And now none of these things are really worth our time if it's not at least 15, right? Like, you know, we need at least 15 of those things for it to even be worth putting on. And for life, you know, let's say 50, and let's just see what shows up here. Boom. And now you've got a lot of options here showing up for as low as 1 exalted orb that would be helping with your resistance problem. And they're not even socketed yet, so you could get even more resistances on there by socketing it yourself after you got it. One of the things I like to do when I've searched in this way is I like to click on the thing that is most important to me. So maybe I really need fire resistance. So if you click on fire resistance, it's going to sort the results by fire resistance. So boom, here's one that's 35 to fire resistances. That would be huge if I had a fire resistance deficit that I was trying to fill. And look, it's only 1 exalt. And I made my search such that it caps out at 2 exalts. So I know when I filter it this way, I'm not going to see anything that I can't buy, right? And you could do the same for life. If more life was more important than anything else to you, you could click on the life tab and you can see what shows up. Boom, there's one here with 168 health, 30 fire, 19 cold, you know, for 1 exalt. That could be a great purchase. It was listed 7 minutes ago. When it's only been on here for that long, sometimes it'll be the case that other people haven't noticed that it was up. So from this point, what you would do is you would click direct whisper. You just click this button while you're logged into the game and you'll hear a tink sound. It says down here, whisper sent. You come into game and you'll see the game whispered the person for you. Now, usually if they are willing to trade, they will invite you to their party almost instantly. Sometimes either the item won't be available anymore, or they'll realize they want to sell it for more, or they'll be doing something like a trial that they can't get out of. And so they will either just not respond to you, or they will say, oh, sorry, you know, I'm busy right now. And so you'll have to go to the next person in line. So then maybe we try this person here that had 35, right? I don't need this item, but I'm just making the transaction for this example here. So then we whisper the next person and we say, hey, we're looking for this item. You can go ahead and have that exalt ready. There it is, right? And you want to try to be quick because he's going back to his hideout to make this trade. We accept the party invite. From here, we just click on this swirly. Boom. That's going to put us to wherever he is, usually in their hideout. Now I'm in his hideout. I can just stand here. I don't have to move at all once I get in here, and I just click accept trade. Now it's very important that you verify that you're getting what you are paying for. So this is the one. It had the 35 resistance, 68 life. Yep, that's what I whispered him for. Put that in here. He'll hover over yours. You both accept. Boom. Now you've purchased an item on the auction house. Very easy to do. You can say a nice little thank you, good luck, and be on your way. And if you want to go back to your hideout, you could just type /hideout. And it takes you right back there. And it's a nice hotkey bind to set up if you're interested in doing something like that. Now, what if you are the seller? Well, it's a slightly more complicated process. So if you're the seller, what you have to do is first you have to have a premium stash tab. So if it's premium, you'll be able to right click on it or click on it, right? And you'll get this menu to pop up and you'll see the option to make it public. If you cannot make the tab public, like this is not a premium tab. So when I right click on it, there's no option to make it public. So I couldn't sell to people on the trade website from this tab. In order for people to see it on the trade website, I have to be able to make it public, right? So we have this tab right here. This one I've made public, right? Public. And I set it to each item being individually priced. I wouldn't mess with negotiable pricing. And if you want a junk tab where you just want to see if someone will buy things that you randomly throw stuff into, you could set one for 5 exalts or 2 exalts or whatever you're looking to get out of it and just throw items in there. And then if someone happens to want it, they can. Otherwise, you can do set each item individually priced, make sure that it's public. That's checked, approve. And then you right click on an item and you go exact price, however many exalted orbs. Right now, the de facto currency that everyone's using to trade is exalted orbs. So if you list something for other currencies, it's going to complicate things. It might not be as appetizing to other people. So right now, everyone's using exalted orbs. So you're going to list your price in exalted orbs that you're hoping to get out of that item. So you would set exact price, 1 exalt, check. That's it. Now you go and you play the game, and while you're playing, that item is on that POE trade site that we just showed you. And when someone does their search and they see your item and they want it, they'll click on the direct whisper button. A whisper will pop up for you, and then from there, you can just click on their name and click invite to party. On PC, you just right click invite to party and it'll invite them to your party. Then you'll come to your hideout. The item that they're trying to trade for will be outlined in purple. There will be a purple outline around that item, because sometimes you'll have this thing full of items and it's like, well, okay, which one did they want again? I can't remember where I put that. And so the game highlights it for you. It makes it nice and easy to see. And you just grab that, put it in your inventory, and then their name will be right here. And you just right click on their name, their portrait on your screen, and click trade. And then you go through the trade process like we did with the last guy. And that's it. So the only barrier to really being involved in selling items is going to be having a premium tab. And you'll get those from the microtransaction shop right here. So you click that button, this pops up, come on down to sales. And a lot of times there will be sales for stash tabs, and you could just pick one up. Look at these, 25% off right now, 22% off this one. And for trading, premium quad stash tabs are great because they're massive, but as long as it says it's a premium stash tab, you'll be able to sell items from it. So here's one, here's a premium stash tab. It's 30 coins. I think that works out to $3. When you're selling items and you're trying to figure out how much an item is worth, you can basically just search for that item on the auction house. If you were selling the helmet, you would do a similar thing. You would search for an item. Like, let's say we wanted to sell the item that we just bought. Our helmet has 68 health, 35, and 15. And so we would come here and we would search for a little under those values probably, because if it's something just under us, people would be willing to save a lot of money to buy that. So then we go like 50, 10, 10. We knock a little bit off of each one, and then we see roughly what items with these stats are currently going for. We look at it and we go, okay, 1 exalt. Okay, it's as low as 1 exalt, which is about as low as you're going to see on the auction house. We know, okay, we're not going to get more than 1x for this item. And so you kind of reverse search your item to determine approximately what it's worth, what other people are trying to sell similar items for. And generally, if you want it to sell fast, then you undercut them by a little bit. And that's everything you need to know to trade in Path of Exile 2. It's very simple. It's like riding a bike. You do it once, you'll know how to do it forever. So don't be afraid of it. Now, there's one other type of trading, and that's for currency only. So when you're trying to exchange one currency for another, you don't have to leave Path of Exile. You can do it in game. You just go to Alva in your hideout, go to currency exchange, and here you can say the currency that you want. Maybe you need more of a certain currency for crafting. You're trying to craft something, or maybe you need a perfect jeweler's orb because you just can't find one. Click there, perfect jeweler's orb. What do I have in exchange? Okay, I have exalted orbs right here. I have 225 of those. So how many would it take for a perfect? Okay, it's going for 72 exalted orbs. After you do that, you have to click in both boxes saying, I acknowledge that I'm getting 1 for 72, and then you click place order, and it's going to cost a little bit of gold for you to make that trade, and it's instantly going to give you the item that you purchased. And you can do all that in game, and you can do that for exalted orbs. You can do it for chaos, gem cutters, anything that you need that you're just not finding, or maybe you're not finding fast enough. You can come in here and exchange one currency for another. Because a lot of times you'll end up, you'll look in your stash and you'll have loads of some currency that you're just not using. Maybe you have way more real orbs than you need, and you want to offload some of them and try to convert those to exalted orbs. So you can come to her, currency exchange. I want exalted orbs, and I'll trade. I have regal, and it says that 1 exalted orb is going for about 8 regal orbs. So you click in both boxes, and then you can click place order, make that exchange. So very handy to exchange currency. It can really help you get a little bit of a currency that you just seem to be falling short of by trading a currency that you have way too much of. And that is the entire guide. If you enjoyed this, be sure to leave a comment, like the video, or subscribe to the channel to support. And if you enjoy quality beginner guides like this, consider clicking the join button down below to become a member of the channel and support the creation of quality gaming content. Massive shout out to my existing channel members for making these in-depth guides possible. These things take a ton of time. If you're not sure what to do next, check out one of my other Path of Exile 2 guides linked in the description or popping up on screen right now. I hope to see you in the next one. Into a chobber chabber, into a chobber chabber leaden ham, into a chobber chabber leaden, into this chobber chabber leaden great hammer.